Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. I'm Tom, and today we're going to be wrapping up the month of July. And this July is definitely going to be a month I never forget. Not only was it a fantastic reading month, not only did I get to go see the Superman movie with Talking Story and Chris from the Bearded Book Beast, on July 1st of this year, on my 4-year anniversary, I proposed to my girlfriend, now fiance. You have seen here on the channel a few different times. She's been in a few videos. But yeah, I did that, and so it's definitely going to be something I never forget. And this is just a fantastic month for that reason alone. I'll maybe throw a couple pictures up. The pictures won't be from when we got engaged, actually, because we did a hike and I proposed on top of a mountain out in Brevard, North Carolina, called Looking Glass Rock. And we were actually had the top of the mountain completely to ourselves for about 10 minutes. We got there was one or two people, and they happened to all just leave at the same time, and I got to kind of do it with us just alone on top of this mountain all by ourselves in beautiful western North Carolina. So no pictures were really taken, and we were also super sweaty and disgusting. It was so hot and humid, which was maybe a little bit of an oversight on my part, but we did take a few pictures when we were on vacation with my family a couple of weeks ago in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So from the mountains to the sea this month for me. But yeah, I just thought I'd share that fun little bit of a life update because, yeah, like I said, she's been on the channel here a few times, and July, I mean, doesn't really get much better than that. But with that being said, let's go ahead, get into the books, because that's really why you're here. You don't really want to hear my sappy love story. But the first book I finished this month was Sorcerer's Legacy by Janny Wurts. This is my third world of Janny's that I have read. This is a standalone novel, and it is one that I really enjoyed. This is also her first novel, so it was really cool to go back and read this after having read some of her later works. I have read The Master of White Storm and then the first 4 books in her Wars of Light and Shadow series, and a couple of novellas that are inside of that world as well. And like I said, this being her first one, it still had that Janny feel to it. It still had that prose feel to it. It felt like a world she had created. And like I said, I enjoyed it. 4 stars. It's in the running for my book of the month. It's kind of between that and one other book that we'll get to. It actually be the last book I finished this month that we'll talk about here. But Sorcerer's Legacy is a great time. It's a lot of political maneuvering, and that it's more of that kind of a story where we're with characters going to a new world and kind of trying to figure out all of the politics that are going on. And the very introduction to the story, this is like in the first 5 pages, so it's not really a spoiler to say this, but our main character is basically a war prize. Her kingdom has been conquered, her husband has been slain, and she is pregnant with her husband who has just been assassinated's child. And the conquering kingdom is basically going to try to figure out how to use that to their best advantage, make her a concubine, whatever they need to do to feel like they are in power and securing their position. And while she's in a dungeon, a wizard comes to her and says, you are in this situation, but you can come to my world and help me save my prince. And basically the plot goes on from there. She has this decision to make of, is she going to stay in her kingdom and maybe try to do things there, or is she going to go to this new world and help somebody she's never met before? Maybe she feels like it's a better life, something like that. And I will say there are some jaw-dropping moments in here. Towards the end of the book, something happens that when I was listening, I listened to this on audio, I had to stop. And I just sat there just absolutely astounded that that's just what happened. Jenny is not somebody who is afraid to show you some awful things on the page, and that is definitely one that I was just like, whoa, could not believe it. I also do just want to mention I did have the chance to buddy read this with Zachary Shea, and I had a great time going back and forth with him and discussing it. And like I said, Jenny Wurts, fantastic writer. The prose is there, and it is fun to see the differences. And I don't know if you like growth, I guess is probably how you'd want to say, from this book to some of her later stuff, where I mean, especially in her Wars of Light and Shadow series, it's such a big world that she's building out, and this being a standalone, it's just a cool thing to see. So this is definitely one, if you are interested in Jenny, I would say go ahead and give this one a chance. It's not going to maybe give you the best idea if you would want to continue on with her big series, The Wars of Light and Shadow, but it's a great entry point. I mean, any Janny book is a great entry point because she is just such a fantastic writer, and anytime I get to read one of her books, I feel like it's a privilege. I feel like it's such a rewarding experience, and that's not always the feeling I get when I read a book, but there's something about Janny's writing that just like makes it feel rewarding and a really fun time. So that was a great experience. Like I said, 4-star there from Janny. I don't think that I've never had a book less than a 4-star from Janny, so I think that just kind of tells you what I think about her as an author. And then the next book up is actually another buddy read, and that's By Blood, by Salt by J.L. Odom. This is the self-published fantasy blog off 10 winner. So this won the most recent competition, and I've heard a lot of praise for it. And this is definitely a very military-esque fantasy. And while I really liked this book and I gave this one a 4 star as well, I have such interesting feelings about this book. I don't know a better way to say it than that, because this is a book that, while it feels a lot happens, nothing happens at the same time, which I know makes no sense when you say it like that. And I know a book one, I have said this again and again and again recently, but with this being a book one, it feels so much like a prequel that I'm going to be really curious that when I do go to read the second book, do I feel like I'm missing a whole lot, or like how much did this play into the story? I don't know. I've got a lot of interesting thoughts about it, because so much of that, like, military sitting around marching place to place talking, and it's like, it's not that just walking from place to place is a bad thing in the fantasy story. I mean, the first three Wheel of Time books that I absolutely adore, it's a couple groups of people going to walking to a couple different places over and over again for like 3 straight books, right? But there was just something about this one. Maybe it was the desert setting. I don't know what it was. I know people have kind of compared this to, I don't want to say Malazan, but this, like, that military-esque feeling that some of the Malazan books do have, of like you're sitting around campfires, marching, soldiers talking, just kind of being around each other. It was a time. At one point, I was like, I'm not sure if I hate this or really like it, and obviously, I ended up really liking it. And a lot of that has to do with the main character. I found the main character to probably be the most interesting part of this book, because this book definitely is looking into othering, the separation of cultures, and like having a kind of a caste system inside of a culture. So you have this person, our main character in this story, who is definitely a very competent leader. The people in his troop respect him and all of these things, but because of what kind of person he is relegated to not being able to have these leadership positions and all these things. And the amount of restraint that this character has to continually show and do, and everything, I thought was also just super, super well done, and was a really interesting thing to explore, especially in like a military aspect where you would hope that the cream rises to the top, and that is not always necessarily the case. I will also say this book has some very hateable characters, which is always just a really fun thing when there's like a character that you can just like absolutely hate and you want something really bad to happen to them. But some of that does also get played with, where you understand why maybe characters act a certain way, and there's an examination of like culture and stuff like that. So I don't know. There's a lot going on in that book. At some point, I will definitely get to the second one, and I'm looking forward to my discussion that I'm going to have with this. Like I said, this is a buddy read with Noel D, Chance, Dylan, and Jake from Nerd Level Rising. So that will definitely be a fun time, because I think this is a book that I expect Chance and Jake to like this book a lot more than I did. Noelle, I'm not sure. I don't know what she's going to think. So I don't know. I only say that because I know they really like Malazan, and I feel like there's some parallels there. So we'll see what happens with that. And then next up, I finally completed one of my yearly goals, and that is to read one nonfiction book with this Julius Caesar book by Philip Freeman. Now, I didn't know a whole lot about Julius Caesar or ancient Rome all that much. I know there was the meme of like, men only think about the Roman Empire or daily think about it. And like, I mean, who doesn't think about the Roman Empire a little bit? It's just like an important part of history. But like, Julius Caesar himself is not a character that I feel like I had a really good knowledge of. I really thought of him as a charismatic leader who had the backing of pretty much everybody, who was then betrayed. And that's the idea I had about him. And this book was a great illustration of not just the later part of Caesar's life, but really what led Julius Caesar to being Julius Caesar. When I say that, I mean, it shows how he was able to consolidate power, build himself up to be the person that he became. And I really enjoyed that. It felt like I was going back to school a little bit. I was learning, and it was just a great time. It makes me feel like maybe I should try to bump it up to reading a little bit more nonfiction than I do right now, because it was nice to just kind of go back and learn so many things that I didn't know about. All of the time he spent in Gaul, the time he spent in Spain. I didn't know he went to Britain. I like some of the stuff that happens later on in his life in Egypt and everything. Like, there's just so much stuff that I didn't realize happened at the time. And so I will say with this book, and it's impossible to do this in any kind of history book, when you have a person like Julius Caesar who lived such a tremendous life and did so much stuff, you can't get everything into a book that I feel like is easily consumable. I would definitely like to read a book that maybe spends a little bit more time on like the last 10 or 15 years of his life, where he's really at the peak of his power, maybe right at the time of the Civil War that he has. That's like maybe the time period I really would like to spend a little bit more time on. Would like to also see maybe some of the stuff he did while he was in Egypt as well, which would encompass that time period as well. But like, man, so much I learned here, and it was a lot of fun. So if you are somebody who like me wants to get a nonfiction in, this is a time period you're interested in, or a person a historic person you are interested in, I definitely recommend that Philip Freeman Julius Caesar book, because it's an easy read. It's not too dense, and it doesn't feel like you need a whole lot of like prerequisite knowledge to get through it, which I think is important in a historical book like this, because it's really easy to sometimes just go into a book where you feel like you're missing so much information that you can't understand the story the way that you should be. So once again, I think that was a very, very good one, and I'm glad that is my nonfiction read. That was actually recommended to me by It's Lit Book Reviews. I always have a great time talking with them. They read a lot of nonfiction, and we're also doing a Wheel of Time read along together. So that has been a whole lot of fun. You can check those videos out as well. And then next up, I returned to Sun Eater with The Lesser Devil. So this is Sun Eater 1.5. And I actually had a really good time with this. I had kind of gotten you don't really need to read a lot of the Sun Eater novellas, but I was kind of thinking about The Expanse. And if you're not super familiar with The Expanse almost between every book has a novella that you can read. And they're not necessary to be read to really understand the story, except I do argue that two later on, I think it's Strange Dogs and Algernon, two novellas in The Expanse world that you should read before you read the next book. But that's besides the point. But I kind of heard that it's kind of like that with Sun Eater, where like it might flesh out the world, you might learn some stuff about it, but it's not like 100% necessary reading. But I will say that I'm really glad I read this. I feel like some important stuff happened in here. We get to spend time with characters that, you know, who knows when, if we'll see. I've only read one of the main Sun Eater books, so who knows when we'll come back to see some of those characters, or if we ever will. I really don't know. So I think it was a good time, and honestly, I got to spend time with characters that I wanted to, because you get a glimpse of them in the first book, but then they're gone. And I'm kind of glad I got to fill in some of those gaps, see some of the things that happened. And so, yeah, it was a great time. I gave that one a 3-star just because, you know, novellas, that's normally about as high as you can get from me, because I don't know, sometimes I need an umph, but that's not always true. So like I said, I'm very glad to be getting more and more into Sun Eater, going to definitely be continuing that journey. And so, yeah. And then the last book that I'm going to end up finishing in the month of July, and I have not actually finished it just yet, but that is The Way of Adan by Philip Chase. And I have just got to say, I have absolutely been enjoying this book so much. I think there are so many things about it that have been so well done. When the Adan trilogy ended, I wasn't sure I really needed a sequel to it, especially one that has such a close gap. Like, I think this is set 16 years after the events of The Way of Adan. And I was like, I don't know, maybe like I'd like to see 200 years or something to see really like long-lasting impacts of things that have happened at the end of that series. But also at the same time, like, it's kind of nice to be back with some of the characters from the original trilogy, but I've also so much enjoyed the new group of characters that we're getting to follow as well. I think that the conflict that has been portrayed in this makes so much sense for how the end of the original trilogy ended. It's paying homage to some of those characters, and it's just, you know, it's been a great time, and I'm enjoying it so much. It really is just clicking on all cylinders for me. It's a fast read. It's definitely written a little bit differently than the original trilogy, but like in a great way. And there's just so many things about it that are working so well. So right now, because I haven't finished it as I'm recording this, I will finish it in the month of July. I'll probably finish it today, actually. It is right now between The While Darkness Gathers and The Sorcerer's Legacy for my book of the month of July. I'm pretty sure it's going to end up being While Darkness Gathers, but I didn't want to say it without having finished it yet, because that just felt a little bit unfair. But Philip did a great job with this book. I'm excited for anything else he writes in this world. I think he maybe said something about a prequel or something at some point, but this is a world that I really like, and there's just like this philosophy that he has going on, especially in the later books, and this book in particular, that I don't know, I just really enjoy it. And it has that good classic fantasy feel while still being very modern and doing something new and unique. So it's just been a great time all around there. And then technically the last book, this is not one that I will finish in July, not even close, but I did want to start Howling Dark. So I am a couple chapters into Howling Dark at this point, and I don't have too much to say other than, wow, this really just kind of throws you into the world after what happens at the end of Empire of Silence, and you kind of have to readjust your footing, because it feels like a lot has happened that we haven't been there for. So if that makes sense to people who have read the series, I'm sure, but I wasn't really expecting that. I was expecting more of a direct continuation. But I guess with how time is played within this series, that this is going to be something that maybe is more normal as we continue to progress through it. But that is all of my novel reading. I'm going to transition now into some comics and everything, but definitely let me know what you have read so far down in the comments below. Going to the comic front, I read All-Star Superman this month. For a lot of people, this is the quintessential Superman story. If you were to, you know, pull 10,000 Superman fans, comic fans specifically, so many of them, the majority I think would probably say All-Star Superman is the place to be. And this is also the comic that the new movie was loosely based off of. So I definitely wanted to read it before I went and saw the movie. And once again, awesome time getting to hang out with Talking Story and Chris from the Bearded Book Beast, getting to see Superman with them. It was just an awesome time getting to hang out. And once again, July is such a great month, a month I will never forget for a number of reasons. But this comic in general, I had a good time with it, gave it a 4-star. I can't say that it is my favorite Superman comic. That honor still goes to Superman for All Seasons. But I do think that if you wanted to get into reading some comics, you really enjoyed the new Superman movie, this is a great comic to read. And you can get just this compact edition straight off of or from wherever. It has the whole story in here. You don't have to go find a bunch of random comic books in a comic book shop or anything like that. You can read this and have a good time with it. And I do think some interesting things are explored with Superman in here. And, I won't even say that because it feels like a little bit of a spoiler for the story. And if you do read it, I want you to be able to go into it fresh. The next comic that I finished was the Buffy the Vampire Slayer comic. Well, not the whole run, but if you don't know, I really, really love the Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show. It's a fun show that has just this really campy, unique, fun feel to it, and it's I don't know of another show that has the same feel, and it's something that makes me enjoy it so much. And so there's 7 seasons of the TV show, then there's a season 8 that is done all in comics. And I'll be honest, I was a little trepidatious to read it because I wasn't sure, but it was written by the original creator of the TV show, so I was optimistic. Our library had the first bind up of it, and man, I ended up really having a good time with it. It was great to be back in that world, and it felt like Buffy, which is really what more could I ask for, to feel like I'm watching the TV show, but it's in a comic format. It was great. The real problem is going to be finding the rest of them. So I think there's 8-ish of the like bind up volumes, and they're either really expensive or impossible to find. Somehow we got lucky and our library had the first one, so that's definitely going to be something I'm going to try to figure out, because I would like to read the entire season 8 or whatever they call it. I'm pretty sure it's just season 8, volume 1, 2, 3 to 8. So I definitely would love to just see what happens to Buffy and the gang. And there's so much stuff that happens in the last season that I feel like we should figure out, or they'll allude to it here in this comic. And so that will be a great time. If you have never watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, honestly, I do highly recommend it. It's so much fun. It's so campy. Get past the first season, because the first season, the show was still kind of really figuring out what it was trying to be. And then from season 2 onward, it is just a pretty good time. And then the last thing that I've been working on is back to the Invincible compendium. I got this back from the library, and this is going to take me a little while to get through. Hopefully I'll finish it in August, but we'll see. Like I've said a couple times, getting to read this after watching the TV show has been a really fun experiment, because I get to see the differences between the comic and the show, where things are placed inside of the story, because there are definitely some changes that have been made, where some things that are revealed to you right at the beginning of the TV show haven't been revealed yet, and just all kinds of different things. I'm curious on what kind of characters change, and like, are there like massive differences in personality, that kind of stuff. But from what my understanding is, it like, you can watch the TV show and read the comics and kind of get a unique experience both ways, but it is still the same story. So very much looking forward to continuing on with that. And then just the last thing I want to mention, or two last things I want to mention before we get onto the author spotlight, is I had the honor of being part of the launch live stream for Mercy, Tears of the Fallen by fellow booktuber Chance Dillon this month. That was on July 20th. It was actually while I was on vacation. So if you go back and watch that live stream, you'll just see me kind of awkwardly standing over my iPad kind of menacingly, and it was kind of funny. But such a huge honor to be a part of that. Chance wrote a really great book here, and if you have not read it, I highly recommend it. It does so many things well, and I'm super looking forward to the second book, which he's already deep in the editing process of. And I think he's actually already kind of started working on the third book, which is just awesome. That's what you want to see from an author, right? Nobody wants to wait 5 years for the next book. And then the other thing I do want to shout out, and I mentioned them a little bit earlier, but it's Lit Book Reviews, doing a read through. I'm not rereading it, but they are going through. Jesse has not read any of the Wheel of Time before this, and so we have somebody who is completely fresh. Andrew read the first 6 books, so so far it's been a reread for him, but once we get past book 6, it'll be all new for him. And then obviously I have read the whole series, but it has been quite a while ago. I read most of it in 2021, I think. Most of it was 21. I think maybe I finished the last couple books in 2022. So, it's been quite a while for me. So it's been fun to go back and remember some things that have happened and just get to talk about a series that I absolutely love. It is my favorite fantasy series of all time. So that has been fun. And man, I will say, you never know what Andrew's going to say. He is a wild card for sure. But with that being said, let me go ahead and move on to the author spotlight. First, I just want to give a shout out to JCM Byrne. He sent me a copy of Wistful Ascending, And it's a series that I have wanted to get into for a really long time, and so I'm looking forward to diving into that at some point. And then the other two are from some other indie authors. The first one being Masha Winter, and they have a new book called The Winds of War, and it is it is a dark epic fantasy book that released on July 27th, and it says the Astraeus Empire is fracturing, its realm flogged by war and fanaticism. Empress Celine and her Gold Council vie to maintain control, but what is control for a nation built on blood and lies? Okay. And then Travis Cooper, A Shadow's Vendetta, and the sales pitch for this one is a tale from the Silmarillion, but told from the ground level. So yeah, any chance I get to shout out some authors, I'm definitely going to. And once again, great month, absolutely fantastic. I would love to know what you read, did, watch, all that fun stuff down below in the comments. Or as always, you can hit me up on the Book Street. Wow, somebody is being loud outside. But as always, you can hit me up on the Book Street Boys Discord as well. That will all be linked down in the description. But as always, remember to read what you want when you want.